Picture this, a dusty barn in 1887 Montana, where sunbeams slice through weathered wooden slats, illuminating dancing particles of hay and thyme. In the shadows between forgotten farm equipment and aging feed sacks, a curious 8-year-old girl makes a discovery that will unravel decades of carefully buried secrets. Sometimes the most innocent finds carry the heaviest truths, and sometimes a child's curiosity is exactly what a family needs to heal wounds they didn't even know existed. Before we dive into this incredible true story of family secrets, hidden truths, and the courage to face the past, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell, because stories like this one remind us that the truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how deeply it's been buried. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Whitmore ranch as 8-year-old Emma climbed down from the breakfast table, her blonde braids bouncing with each step. The Montana sky stretched endlessly blue above the rolling hills, promising another perfect day for adventure. Emma, don't go wandering too far, her mother, Catherine, called from the kitchen, where she was already preparing lunch for the ranch hands. Your father and the men will be moving cattle through the north pasture today. Yes, Mama, Emma replied, though her attention was already focused on the old barn that stood at the edge of their property. She'd been forbidden to play there alone. Her father, Jacob Whitmore, had always insisted it was too dangerous with all the old equipment and rotting floorboards. But today felt different. Today, curiosity burned stronger than caution. Jacob Whitmore had built his ranch from nothing after the Civil War, arriving in Montana territory with little more than determination and a small inheritance from his deceased parents. Over 20 years, he transformed the wildland into one of the most prosperous cattle operations in the valley. He was respected by his neighbors, loved by his family, and known throughout the territory as a man of integrity. Yet Emma had always sensed something hidden beneath her. Father's steady exterior, a sadness that flickered in his eyes when he thought no one was looking, a tension that gripped his shoulders whenever anyone mentioned the early days of the ranch. The old barn stood like a monument to those mysterious early years. Built before Emma was born, it had been abandoned when her father constructed the larger, more modern barn closer to the house. Now it served as storage for equipment too broken to use, but too valuable to throw away. Emma approached the weathered structure, her heart beating faster with each step. The heavy wooden door groaned on rusty hinges as she pushed it open, releasing the musty scent of old hay and forgotten time. Inside, shafts of sunlight created a cathedral of golden beams. Dust motes danced in the air like tiny spirits, and Emma felt as though she was entering a sacred space where secrets waited to be discovered. She picked her way carefully through the maze of abandoned farm equipment. A broken plow, barrels with missing staves, coils of rope that had seen better days. In the far corner, a pile of old feed sacks caught her attention. Something about the way they were arranged seemed deliberate, as if they were hiding something important. Emma began moving the heavy sacks, her small hands struggling with their weight. As she lifted the last one, her breath caught in her throat. There, nestled in a small wooden crate, lay the most beautiful doll she had ever seen. The doll was exquisite, about 18 inches tall with a porcelain head, delicate painted features, and real human hair arranged in perfect ringlets. She wore a dress of deep blue silk that, despite years of storage, still held traces of its original elegance. Tiny pearl buttons ran down the front of the bodice, and delicate lace trimmed the collar and cuffs. But it was the doll's face that truly captivated Emma. The painted features were so lifelike, so expressive, that she almost expected the glass eyes to blink. There was something hauntingly familiar about those features, though Emma couldn't place why. Carefully, reverently, Emma lifted the doll from its hiding place. As she did, a small piece of yellowed paper fluttered to the ground. Emma picked it up and saw in faded ink a single word written in elegant script. Lily. Lily, Emma whispered, testing the name. It felt right somehow, as if the doll had been waiting years for someone to speak her name again. Emma cradled the doll against her chest, feeling an immediate and inexplicable connection. It was as if Lily had been waiting specifically for her, as if their meeting was destined. Emma! Emma, where are you? Her mother's voice, sharp with worry, cut through the barn's peaceful silence. Emma realized she'd been gone much longer than intended. The sun had moved considerably across the sky, and she could hear the distant sound of cattle and men's voices from the north pasture. Quickly, Emma wrapped Lily in an old piece of burlap she found nearby and hurried toward the barn door. She paused at the threshold, looking back at the corner where she'd made her discovery. Something told her that finding Lily was just the beginning, that the beautiful doll held secrets that went far deeper than her hiding place in the old barn. There you are. Catherine Whitmore appeared at the barn entrance, her face flushed with relief and exasperation. "I've been calling for you for 10 minutes. What are you doing in here? You know your father doesn't want you playing in this old barn." Emma clutched the wrapped bundle closer to her chest. "I was just exploring, Mama. I didn't mean to worry you." Catherine's eyes narrowed as she noticed the bundle in Emma's arms. "What do you have there?" Emma hesitated. Something deep inside warned her to be careful, to think before she spoke. Just some old rags I found. I thought maybe we could use them for cleaning." It was the first lie Emma had ever told her mother, and it tasted bitter on her tongue. But the protective instinct she felt toward Lily was stronger than her usual honesty. Catherine studied her daughter's face for a long moment, and Emma held her breath, certain her mother could see right through the deception. Finally, Catherine nodded. "Well, bring them along then. But Emma, I want your promise that you won't come into this barn alone again. It's not safe, and your father would be very upset if he knew you'd been in here." "I promise, Mama," Emma said, meaning it. She had what she'd come for, though she hadn't known she was looking for anything at all. As they walked back toward the house, Emma's mind raced with questions. Who was Lily? Why had she been hidden in the barn? And why did Emma feel such a strong connection to a doll she'd never seen before? That evening, after her parents had gone to bed, Emma carefully unwrapped Lily in the privacy of her own room. By lamplight, the doll was even more beautiful than she'd appeared in the barn. The silk dress rustled softly as Emma examined every detail. The tiny stitches in the seams, the delicate embroidery on the bodice, the way the real hair felt soft and fine between her fingers. As Emma turned the doll over to examine the back of her dress, she noticed something she'd missed before. Sewn into the inside of the collar, in thread so fine it was almost invisible, were the initials LW. Emma's heart skipped a beat. LW Lily Whitmore. Could this doll have belonged to someone in her own family? But that was impossible. Emma was an only child, and her father had never mentioned any sisters or other relatives. As far as she knew, she was the only Whitmore child who had ever lived on this ranch. Emma carefully placed Lily on her dresser, positioning her so the doll seemed to be looking out the window toward the old barn where she'd spent so many years in hiding. As she settled into bed, Emma found herself staring at the doll's painted face, wondering what secrets those glass eyes had witnessed. "Who are you, Lily?" she whispered into the darkness. "And why do I feel like I've been waiting my whole life to find you?" The doll, of course, didn't answer, but in the flickering lamplight, Emma could have sworn she saw something shift in those painted features, a sadness so deep it made her chest ache, and a longing that seemed to reach across the years. As Emma finally drifted off to sleep, she dreamed of a little girl with dark hair and sad eyes, calling out for someone who never came. In the dream, the girl was holding Lily, tears streaming down her face as she whispered, "Please don't forget me. Please don't let them forget me." Emma woke with tears on her own cheeks, though she couldn't remember why she was crying. But the dream felt more like a memory than imagination, and she knew with absolute certainty that finding Lily was only the beginning of a much larger story. Emma spent the next few days in a state of distracted fascination, her thoughts constantly returning to Lily and the mysterious initials sewn into the doll's collar. She carried the secret like a precious stone, examining it from every angle when she was alone, but carefully hiding it whenever her parents were near. During meals, she found herself studying her father's face, searching for any resemblance to the doll's delicate features. Jacob Whitmore was a handsome man in his late 40s, with dark hair now touched with silver and kind brown eyes that crinkled when he smiled. But there was something about the shape of his nose, the curve of his lips, that reminded Emma of Lily's painted face. "Emma, you're awfully quiet today," her father observed during dinner on the third day after her discovery. "Are you feeling all right?" Emma startled, realizing she'd been staring at him while lost in thought. "Yes, Papa, I'm fine." "Just thinking, dangerous habit for a young lady," Jacob teased gently, but Emma caught the quick glance he exchanged with her mother. "What's got you so deep in thought?" Emma's heart raced. This was her chance to ask about the doll, to finally get some answers. But something in her father's expression, a wariness that hadn't been there before, made her hesitate. "I was just wondering about our family," she said carefully. About whether I have any cousins or aunts or uncles I've never met." The change in her father's demeanor was immediate and unmistakable. His fork paused halfway to his mouth, and the color drained from his face. Catherine reached across the table to place a gentle hand on his arm. "Emma, sweetheart," her mother said softly, "you know your father's parents died when he was young, and my family is back in Ohio. We've told you this before, but what about before Papa came to Montana?" Emma pressed, her curiosity overriding her usual obedience. "Did he have any brothers or sisters?" Jacob set down his fork with deliberate care, his hands trembling slightly. When he looked at Emma, His eyes held a pain so deep it made her stomach clench with guilt for causing it. "No, Emma," he said quietly. "I was an only child. There's no other family to speak of." But Emma had spent 8 years learning to read her father's expressions, and she knew with absolute certainty that he was lying. The knowledge hit her like a physical blow, not because she was angry, but because she'd never known her father to be anything but completely honest with her. The rest of dinner passed in uncomfortable silence, and Emma excused herself as soon as she could politely do so. In her room, she sat on her bed and stared at Lily, more confused than ever. "He's lying," she whispered to the doll. "But why? What happened that was so terrible he can't even talk about it?" That night, Emma lay awake listening to the murmur of her parents' voices through the thin walls. She couldn't make out the words, but the tone was serious, worried. Several times she heard her name, and once she was certain she heard her mother say something about telling her the truth. The next morning brought an unexpected opportunity for answers. Jacob had ridden out early to check on a sick cow in the far pasture, and Catherine was busy in the garden. Emma found herself alone in the house, with access to places she'd never thought to explore before. Her parents' bedroom was off-limits under normal circumstances, but these weren't normal circumstances. Emma's need for answers outweighed her usual respect for boundaries. The room was simply furnished, a large bed with a quilt Catherine had made, a dresser with a mirror, and a wardrobe for clothes. But it was the small wooden chest at the foot of the bed that caught Emma's attention. She'd seen her mother take important papers from it before, and she'd always wondered what other treasures it might contain. With trembling hands, Emma lifted the heavy lid. Inside, she found exactly what she'd hoped for: a collection of documents, letters and photographs that told the story of her family's past. Most of the papers were what she expected: her parents' marriage certificate, the deed to the ranch, letters from her mother's family in Ohio. But at the bottom of the chest, wrapped in a piece of faded blue silk that looked remarkably similar to Lily's dress, was a small bundle that made Emma's heart race. The bundle contained 3 items: a tintype photograph, a birth certificate, and a letter written in her father's careful handwriting. Emma's hands shook as she examined the photograph first. It showed a man who was unmistakably her father, but younger, perhaps in his early 20s. He was standing beside a woman Emma didn't recognize, and between them stood a little girl of perhaps 5 or 6 years old. The little girl had dark hair arranged in ringlets, delicate features and eyes that seemed to look directly into Emma's soul. She was wearing a dress of deep blue silk with pearl buttons and lace trim, the exact same dress that Lily wore. With growing excitement and dread, Emma picked up the birth certificate. The faded ink was difficult to read, but she could make out the essential information. Name: Lily Rose Whitmore, born April 15, 1874. Father: Jacob Thomas Whitmore. Mother: Sarah Elizabeth Whitmore. Emma's mind reeled. Lily Rose Whitmore, born in 1874, which would make her... Emma did the quick calculation. If Lily had lived, she would be 13 years old now. But the doll, the hidden photograph, the secrecy, it all pointed to one terrible conclusion. With trembling fingers, Emma unfolded the letter. It was dated September 20th, 1879, and written in her father's hand, though the writing was shaky and blotted with what looked like tears. "My dearest Lily, today we laid you to rest beside your mother in the little cemetery on the hill. I cannot bear to write these words, cannot accept that you are gone, but Dr. Morrison says I must face the truth. The fever took you so quickly, my darling girl. One day you were laughing and playing with your doll, and 3 days later... I cannot finish this sentence. I cannot accept this reality. Your stepmother Catherine is kind and patient with my grief, but she doesn't understand why I cannot speak of you, why I cannot bear to see your things or hear your name. How can I explain that every reminder of you is like a knife in my heart? How can I tell her that I failed you, just as I failed your mother? I have hidden your doll in the old barn, along with this letter and the photograph of our last happy day together. Perhaps someday I will be strong enough to remember you without this crushing pain. Perhaps someday I will be able to tell Emma about the sister she never knew, about the little girl who would have loved her so much. But not today. Today I can only say goodbye and pray that wherever you are, you know how much your papa loved you. Forever your devoted father, Jacob." Emma read the letter 3 times before the full impact hit her. Lily, the doll, the little girl in the photograph, had been her sister, her father's first daughter, who had died of fever when she was only 5 years old. The doll wasn't just a beautiful toy hidden in the barn. It was a memorial, a connection to a sister Emma had never known existed. Tears streamed down Emma's face as she stared at the photograph, trying to imagine what Lily would have been like if she had lived. Would they have been friends? Would Lily have taught her to braid her hair or shared secrets in the dark? Would Emma have felt less lonely growing up if she'd had a sister to confide in? Emma, Emma, where are you? Her mother's voice, calling from downstairs, sent a jolt of panic through Emma's chest. Quickly, she rewrapped the precious items in their blue silk covering and placed them back in the chest, exactly as she'd found them. "Coming, Mama!" she called, wiping her tears and trying to compose herself. But as she hurried downstairs, Emma's mind was spinning with new questions. Why had her father kept Lily's existence a secret? Why couldn't he bear to speak of her, even after all these years? And most importantly, what should Emma do with this knowledge? She found her mother in the kitchen, preparing vegetables for the evening meal. Catherine looked up as Emma entered, and her expression immediately shifted to concern. "Sweetheart, you look upset. What's wrong?" Emma hesitated, torn between her newfound knowledge and her loyalty to her father. But the weight of the secret felt too heavy to carry alone. "Mama," she said carefully, "if someone you loved died a long time ago, would it be wrong to remember them, even if talking about them made other people sad?" Catherine set down her knife and studied Emma's face intently. "That's a very serious question, Emma. Why do you ask?" I was thinking about how we never talk about Papa's life before he came to Montana. And I wondered if maybe there were people he loved who died, and that's why he doesn't like to remember." Catherine was quiet for a long moment, her hands still on the cutting board. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft and sad. "Your father has experienced great loss in his life, Emma. Sometimes when people hurt very deeply, they think the only way to survive is to try to forget. But forgetting isn't the same as healing. Do you think it would help him to remember, if he knew that someone else cared about the people he lost?" Catherine's eyes filled with tears, and she reached out to cup Emma's face in her hands. "Oh, my wise little girl. Yes, I think it might help him very much. But it would have to be his choice. We can't force someone to face their grief before they're ready." Emma nodded, understanding more than her mother realized. That evening, as the family sat together in the parlor after dinner, Emma made a decision that would change everything. She excused herself, claiming she needed to fetch something from her room. When she returned, she was carrying Lily, not hidden in burlap this time, but displayed in all her beautiful, heartbreaking glory. The effect on her father was immediate and devastating. Jacob's face went white as death, and he gripped the arms of his chair so tightly his knuckles turned white. "Where?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Where did you find her?" "In the old barn, Papa," Emma said softly, approaching him slowly as if he were a wounded animal that might bolt. "She was hidden under some feed sacks, but I think she was waiting for someone to find her." Jacob's eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, Emma thought he might collapse. Catherine moved quickly to his side, placing a supportive hand on his shoulder. "Her name is Lily," Emma continued, her own voice thick with emotion. "And she was my sister, wasn't she?" The sound that escaped Jacob's throat was part sob, part moan of pure anguish. He reached out with trembling hands, and Emma carefully placed the doll in his arms. "My little Lily," he whispered, cradling the doll as if it were the child herself. "My sweet, precious girl." And then Jacob Whitmore, the strong, stoic rancher who had built an empire from nothing, broke down and wept for the daughter he had lost 13 years ago, and had never allowed himself to properly mourn. The days following Emma's revelation were unlike anything the Whitmore household had ever experienced. Jacob's carefully constructed walls of silence crumbled completely, and with them came a flood of memories, grief, and stories that had been locked away for over a decade. At first, the emotional release was overwhelming. Jacob would find himself weeping at unexpected moments, while mending fence during meals, or simply when he caught sight of Lily's doll, which now sat in a place of honor on the mantelpiece. Catherine watched her husband with a mixture of relief and concern, finally understanding the source of the sadness that had shadowed their marriage from the beginning. "I should have told you," Jacob said to Emma one evening, as they sat together on the porch, Lily cradled carefully in Emma's arms. "I should have told you about your sister from the very beginning." "Why didn't you, Papa?" Emma asked gently. At 8 years old, she was learning to navigate the complex emotions of the adults around her, with wisdom beyond her years. Jacob was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the rolling hills that stretched endlessly toward the horizon. "Because talking about her made the pain fresh again. Because I was afraid that if I started remembering, I wouldn't be able to stop crying. And because—" He paused, his voice breaking slightly. "Because I felt like I had failed her. How could you have failed her? She got sick. That wasn't your fault, wasn't it?" Jacob's voice was heavy with guilt that had festered for years. "I was her father. I was supposed to protect her, to keep her safe. When the fever came through the valley that autumn, I should have taken her away, should have gotten her to a doctor sooner, should have done something more than just watch her slip away." Emma studied her father's profile. seeing the weight of responsibility and regret that had shaped his life for so many years. "Papa, do you think Lily would want you to be sad forever?" The question was so simple, so innocent, yet it cut straight to the heart of Jacob's struggle. He looked down at his daughter, this bright, compassionate child who had somehow found the courage to bring his buried grief into the light. "No," he said finally. "No, I don't think she would." That night, for the first time in 13 years, Jacob told Emma about her sister. He spoke of Lily's infectious laughter, her love of wildflowers, and the way she would follow him around the ranch, chattering constantly about everything she saw. He described how she had loved her doll, the very same doll Emma now held, and how she would have tea parties in the garden, setting places for all her imaginary friends. "She would have adored you," Jacob said, his voice warm with memory rather than pain. "She always wanted a little sister. She used to ask me when God was going to send her a baby to take care of." Emma felt a bittersweet ache in her chest, imagining the sister she would never know but somehow felt connected to through the beautiful doll in her arms. As the weeks passed, the atmosphere in the Whitmore household began to shift. Then, instead of the heavy silence that had always surrounded the topic of the past, there was now openness and healing. Jacob began sharing more stories about Lily and Catherine, who had always wondered about the sadness in her husband's eyes, finally understood the source of his pain. "I want to visit her grave," Emma announced one morning at breakfast. "I want to see where Lily is buried." Jacob's fork paused halfway to his mouth, but this time the suggestion didn't bring the crushing pain it once would have. Instead, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years, a desire to honor his daughter's memory rather than hide from it. "I think that's a wonderful idea," he said quietly. "It's time." The small cemetery sat on a hill overlooking the ranch, a peaceful spot where wildflowers grew in abundance during the spring and summer months. Jacob had chosen the location carefully, wanting Lily to rest somewhere beautiful, somewhere she could watch over the land she had loved. The three of them walked up the hill together on a crisp autumn morning, Emma carrying Lily's doll and a bouquet of the last wildflowers of the season. Catherine had packed a small picnic, understanding instinctively that this would be more than a brief visit. Lily's grave was marked by a simple white stone that read, "Lily Rose Whitmore, beloved daughter, 1874-1879. Beside it was another stone marking the resting place of Sarah Whitmore, Jacob's first wife and Lily's mother. Emma knelt beside the small grave and carefully placed the wildflowers at the base of the headstone. "Hello, Lily," she said softly. "I'm Emma. I'm your little sister." Jacob's breath caught in his throat as he watched his living daughter speak to his lost one. There was something profoundly healing about seeing Emma there, creating a bridge between past and present, between grief and acceptance. "I found your doll," Emma continued, holding up the beautiful toy. "She's been waiting for you in the barn, but I think maybe she was really waiting for me, to help Papa remember you, and to make sure you're not forgotten." They spent the morning at the cemetery, Jacob sharing more stories about Lily, while Catherine listened with tears in her eyes. Emma asked dozens of questions. What was Lily's favorite food? What games did she like to play? What songs did she sing? With each question, Jacob found himself remembering not just the loss, but the joy his first daughter had brought to his life. "She used to sing while she helped me with chores," Jacob said, a smile creeping across his face. "She had this little song she made up about the chickens, something about how they were silly birds who thought they were queens." Emma giggled. "Can you teach it to me?" And there, beside his daughter's grave, Jacob Whitmore sang for the first time in 13 years. His voice was rusty and broken with emotion, but the simple melody filled the air with something that had been missing from the ranch for far too long, the sound of joy mixed with remembrance. As autumn turned to winter, the Whitmore family established new traditions that honored Lily's memory while celebrating their present happiness. Emma would often be found playing with Lily's doll, creating elaborate stories and adventures that she would later share with her parents. Jacob began visiting the cemetery regularly, bringing fresh flowers and sharing news about the ranch with his buried daughter. But perhaps the most significant change came in Jacob himself. The weight of suppressed grief that had burdened him for so many years began to lift, replaced by a lighter spirit that his family had never seen before. He laughed more easily, smiled more often, and seemed to find joy in simple pleasures that had been overshadowed by his sorrow. "You know," Catherine said one evening, as they watched Emma playing with Lily's doll by the firelight, "I think Lily would be proud of what her little sister has accomplished." Jacob nodded, understanding exactly what his wife meant. Emma hadn't just found a doll in the barn. She had found the key to healing a family's hidden wounds. One snowy December evening, as Emma was getting ready for bed, she made an announcement that surprised her parents. "I want to write a letter to Lily," she said. "I want to tell her about our family now. and about how much we love her, and how we're going to make sure she's always remembered. Jacob and Catherine exchanged glances, both thinking the same thing. Their 8-year-old daughter had wisdom that surpassed her years. "I think that's a beautiful idea," Catherine said. "Would you like help writing it?" Emma shook her head. "I want to do it myself. But maybe Papa could help me think of what to say." That night, father and daughter sat together at the kitchen table, Emma carefully forming letters with her pencil, while Jacob offered gentle suggestions. The letter was simple but heartfelt. "Dear Lily, my name is Emma and I am your little sister. I found your doll in the barn and she is very beautiful. Papa told me all about you and how much he loved you. I wish I could have met you, but I feel like I know you anyway. I want you to know that Papa is not sad all the time anymore. He smiles when he talks about you now instead of crying. Mama says that means you are helping him heal from heaven. I am going to take very good care of your doll, and I will tell my children about you someday so they know they had an aunt who was brave and kind and loved wildflowers. I love you even, though I never met you. Your sister, Emma." When Emma finished writing, Jacob carefully folded the letter and placed it in an envelope. "What should we do with it?" he asked. Emma thought for a moment. "Let's put it with her doll tonight, and tomorrow we can take it to her grave. That way she'll know we haven't forgotten her." As Jacob tucked Emma into bed that night, Lily's doll sitting on the dresser like a guardian angel, he marveled at how much his life had changed since that day in the barn. The discovery of the doll had forced him to confront his grief, but it had also given him something precious, the ability to remember his lost daughter with love instead of only pain. "Papa?" Emma's sleepy voice came from the bed. "Yes, sweetheart. Do you think Lily knows that I found her doll? Do you think she's happy that we're remembering her?" Jacob looked at the beautiful doll with her painted features and glass eyes, and for just a moment, he could have sworn he saw something peaceful in that porcelain face. "Yes, Emma," he said softly. "I think she knows, and I think she's very happy." As he kissed his daughter goodnight and turned down the lamp, Jacob felt a peace he hadn't experienced in 13 years. The doll that had once represented unbearable loss now symbolized something far more powerful, the enduring strength of love and the healing power of remembrance. Outside, snow continued to fall on the Montana landscape, covering the ranch in pristine white. But inside the Whitmore house, warmth and love filled every corner, and the spirit of a little girl who had been gone too long was finally, truly home. Spring arrived early that year, painting the Montana landscape in vibrant greens and filling the air with the sweet scent of wildflowers. For the Whitmore family, it felt like more than just a change of seasons. It was a rebirth, a fresh beginning built on the foundation of truth and healing that Emma's discovery had provided. The transformation in Jacob was remarkable. Neighbors who had known him for years commented on the change, noting how the perpetual shadow of sadness had lifted from his features. He whistled while he worked, told jokes at the general store, and seemed to find joy in everyday moments that had previously passed him by. "It's like watching a man come back to life," old Tom Henderson observed to his wife after encountering Jacob in town. Whatever happened in that family, it's been good for all of them. Emma had grown too, not just in height but in understanding. The responsibility of being the keeper of Lily's memory had given her a sense of purpose that was unusual in a child her age. She tended to Lily's doll with reverent care, but more importantly, she had become the bridge between her father's past and present, helping him integrate his memories of both daughters into a complete picture of his life. One warm May morning, Emma made an announcement that would lead to the most significant change yet. "I want to plant a garden for Lily," she declared over breakfast, "right by her grave, where she can see it from heaven, with all her favorite flowers." Jacob looked up from his coffee, considering the idea. In the past, he had kept the cemetery area simple and stark, unable to bear the thought of creating something beautiful in a place associated with such pain. But now the idea of honoring Lily with a living memorial felt not only appropriate but necessary. "What kind of flowers did she like?" Emma asked. Jacob's face softened with memory. "Wildflowers, mostly. She loved the purple lupines that grow wild in the meadows and the Indian paintbrush, but her absolute favorites were the wild roses that bloom along the creek in June." "Then that's what we'll plant," Emma said with determination. A garden full of all the flowers that made her happy. The project became a family endeavor. Catherine contributed her knowledge of gardening and plant care, while Jacob shared his memories of where each type of flower grew naturally on their land. Emma appointed herself the chief planner, sketching elaborate designs for the garden layout and making lists of everything they would need. But as they began preparing the soil near Lily's grave, Emma had another idea, one that would prove to be the most healing of all, Papa, she said one afternoon as they worked together in the warm sunshine. I think we should invite other people to help us. People who knew Lily, or who have lost someone they loved too. Jacob paused in his digging, considering his daughter's words. The idea of sharing this private memorial with others felt both frightening and strangely appealing. Who did you have in mind? He asked carefully. Well, Mrs. Henderson lost her little boy to the same fever that took Lily, and Mr. Morrison, he was the doctor who tried to help her, wasn't he? Maybe he'd like to plant something too. And what about the other families who lost children that year? Jacob's throat tightened as he realized what Emma was suggesting. She wasn't just proposing a garden for Lily. She was envisioning a memorial for all the children the community had lost, a place where other grieving parents could find comfort and remembrance. That's a beautiful idea, sweetheart, he said quietly. But are you sure you want to share Lily's special place with others? Emma looked up at him with eyes that held wisdom far beyond her 8 years. Papa, if Lily were here, would she want to keep all the beautiful flowers to herself, or would she want to share them with other children who needed them? The answer was obvious. Lily had been generous and kind, always eager to share her toys and treats with others. Of course she would want her memorial garden to bring comfort to other families who had experienced similar losses. Word of the Memorial Garden project spread quickly through the small community. To Jacob's amazement, the response was overwhelming. Families who had lost children, elderly residents who remembered Lily, and even people who simply wanted to contribute to something beautiful and meaningful, all offered to help. Mrs. Henderson was among the first to volunteer, bringing seeds from her own garden, and tears in her eyes as she spoke about her son Tommy, who had died just 2 weeks after Lily. I've never had a proper place to remember him, she confided to Catherine as they worked side by side, preparing flower beds. We buried him in the church cemetery in town, but it's not the same as having somewhere peaceful like this. Dr. Morrison, now in his 70s and long retired, arrived with a wagon full of medicinal herbs and healing plants. I couldn't save them, he said simply to Jacob, but maybe I can help create something that brings peace to those of us who remember. As the garden took shape, it became clear that Emma's vision was creating something far more significant than anyone had anticipated. The memorial wasn't just about remembering the dead, it was about healing the living, bringing together a community that had carried individual griefs in isolation for too many years. The centerpiece of the garden was a beautiful wild rose bush, planted directly in front of Lily's headstone. Around it they created a rainbow of native wildflowers, purple lupines, orange Indian paintbrush, yellow black-eyed Susans, and delicate white prairie roses. Winding paths allowed visitors to walk among the flowers, and several wooden benches provided places for quiet reflection. But perhaps the most meaningful addition was Emma's idea to create small memorial stones for each child who had been lost. Families brought photographs and shared stories, and a local stonecutter donated his services to create simple markers that would ensure no child was forgotten. The garden dedication took place on a perfect June morning, exactly 14 years after Lily's death. Nearly the entire community gathered on the hill overlooking the ranch, creating a circle around the beautiful memorial that had grown from one little girl's desire to honor her unknown sister. Pastor Williams offered a simple blessing, speaking about the power of love to transcend death and the importance of remembering those who had gone before. But it was Emma who provided the most moving moment of the ceremony. Standing beside Lily's grave with the doll cradled in her arms, she spoke in a clear, strong voice that carried across the assembled crowd. My sister Lily died before I was born, but she's still part of our family. When I found her doll in the barn, I learned that love doesn't end when someone dies. It just changes into something different. This garden is for Lily, but it's also for all the children who are remembered here, and for all the families who love them still. She paused, looking around at the faces of neighbors who had become friends through shared grief and healing. Lily would have loved this garden, but most of all, she would have loved that it brings people together. That's what love does. It connects us to each other, even across time, even across death. As Emma placed a bouquet of wild roses on Lily's grave, there wasn't a dry eye in the gathering. Jacob felt his heart swell with pride for this remarkable daughter who had taught him that healing didn't mean forgetting, and that love shared was love multiplied. The memorial garden became a beloved community landmark. Families would bring picnics and spend afternoons among the flowers. Children would play hide-and-seek among the paths, and those who needed comfort would find solace in the peaceful beauty of the space. Emma continued to tend Lily's doll with loving care, but she also began sharing the story of her sister with other children, teaching them about the importance of remembering family history and honoring those who came before. On Emma's 9th birthday, Jacob presented her with a special gift, a leather-bound journal where she could record all the stories about Lily, ensuring that her sister's memory would be preserved for future generations. "Someday," Jacob said as Emma examined the beautiful book, "you'll have children of your own. And when you do, you can tell them about their Aunt Lily, and about how a little girl's curiosity and courage helped heal a family's broken heart." Emma hugged the journal to her chest, understanding the weight of the responsibility she was accepting. "I'll write down everything, Papa. Every story, every memory. Lily will never be forgotten." That evening, as the family sat together on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink, Emma made her first entry in the journal. "Today is my 9th birthday, and Papa gave me this book to write about Lily. I want to start by saying that finding her doll was the best thing that ever happened to our family, even though it made us all cry at first. Lily died when she was 5 years old, but she's still teaching us things. She taught Papa that it's okay to remember people you love, even when it hurts. She taught Mama that sometimes the best way to help someone is just to be patient while they figure things out. And she taught me that being a sister is about more than just living in the same house. It's about carrying someone in your heart forever. I never got to meet Lily, but I know her anyway. I know she was brave and kind and loved wildflowers. I know she would have been the best big sister in the world. And I know that somewhere she's watching over our family and smiling because we finally learned how to remember her with joy instead of only sadness. Tomorrow I'm going to pick flowers from her garden and put them in her doll's hair. I think she would like that." As Emma finished writing and closed the journal, she looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere among those distant lights, she imagined Lily watching over them, no longer forgotten but celebrated. No longer a source of pain, but a wellspring of love that would flow through generations. The doll sat on Emma's dresser, beautiful and serene, no longer a hidden secret but a cherished family treasure. And in the memorial garden on the hill, wild roses bloomed in abundance, their sweet fragrance carrying on the evening breeze like whispered messages of love that transcended time itself. If this story of family secrets, healing and the power of remembrance touched your heart, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories from the American frontier. Hit that like button if you believe in the importance of honoring those who came before us, and let us know in the comments, what family story or hidden history do you wish you could uncover? Remember, sometimes the most beautiful discoveries come from having the courage to look into the shadows of the past. Until next time, keep believing in the power of love to heal even the deepest wounds, and never underestimate the wisdom that can come from the innocent curiosity of a child.